Hi, my friends. Today we're here to talk about Interview with the Vampire, Season 2, Episode 7, the penultimate episode of the season. The episode's entitled, I Could Not Prevent It. And this is an episode that we've all know that the story was coming, and it was a sad day. A lot of things went on, and I'm here to commiserate with all of you guys. So just get let's get things out of the way. This is the episode where Claudia reaches her demise. So what I'm going to do for this video is I'm just going to give a very, very high level overview of what happened. And I'll give my assessment, my analysis on each of the characters and how they played into the story and what I think could happen next week. I'm so bad at these predictions, but I'm going to try it anyway because I'm really excited for what's next. And so let's just get into it. Just an FYI, I have not read Interview with a Vampire or any of the other Anne Rice properties. And I watched the movie in 1995. I remember nothing about it. So if you feel so compelled to leave a comment in the comment area, just refrain from putting spoilers in because I don't like to be ignorant, but I do like to be ignorant of spoilers. So thank you in advance. All right, we pick up from last week where our trio is abducted. So that's Claudia, Louis, and Madeleine. And they reach the theater basement. They are brought in burlap sacks. They are brutalized. It's really, really, really bad. And I was like, I watched a sneak peek on Friday, and I saw that our trio had the tendons of their ankles cut. And that really hurt me. I have watched so many violent shows. Like I'm watching House of the Dragon, 45 minutes. I've seen a lot of really bad, depraved things in TV. I have never seen anyone cut off someone's ankle tendons to keep them from getting off their seats. Anyway, so they are brought into the theater, and of course, who is there to be the star witness of the trial? Lestat de Lioncourt. Okay, Santiago was running the whole thing with all his bravado, of course, because that's Santiago. And in that, we get some recollections of their life back in Louisiana, the plot to murder Lestat. We get a bit of a retelling of the Claudia creation story, and also that big fight between Louis and Lestat. And yeah, so we get all that sorted out. Claudia is able to speak her mind, of course. And ultimately what happens is Louis gets banished. So he is taken away. He's found guilty, but he's taken away into the crypt at the basement of the theater, with the help of Armand, who gave him that sentence, or led the audience to give him that sentence instead of death. Unfortunately, Claudia and Madeleine weren't so lucky, and they were burnt by the sun, and they died. And yeah, I watched this. Okay, so I was so excited to watch this entire week. I woke up at 6:45. I'm trying to be a morning person, so that actually helped that I went to bed and woke up early to see this show. I've watched it 4 times now, and I'll be honest, I didn't really cry. I thought I was going to be crying right away. I just watched it maybe about an hour ago, and that's the first time I got tears in my eyes because everything just marinated about how sad and tragic Claudia's story really is. So many things to talk about. Let's start with Louis and Lestat, since their stories are so intertwined with each other. So Lestat is here. He's in Paris in the flesh. He's looking pretty good, I may say so myself. He always looks good, though. And we see him on the stage. And I must say, I was actually quite surprised at how subdued he was. Of course, he's a commanding presence. He's very captivating. And he was holding court, literally, because he's Lestat de Lioncourt. But I was very surprised by how reserved he was throughout the entire thing. And he didn't really embellish any of the stories. He didn't give any extra of a flair than what is his natural essence. He wasn't over the top. He wasn't at Santiago levels of over the topness, which is good because this was a very serious hearing. And what we get from Lestat is, again, a basic storytelling of when he met Louis and things like that, but from his perspective. So from the jump, from last season, there were clues that Louis was kind of, he wasn't the most reliable narrator. So everything that we saw him talk about was to be taken with a grain of salt. And Lestat's story definitely supports that theory. And I'm really curious to know, is the real story somewhere in between the two of them? Is it all Lestat? Is it all Louis? We know it's not all Louis because he's been there to confirm it's not. Or is it something else entirely? We don't know. So when he talks about their union and how Louis courted him, how he stared him up and down, how he hunted him. And it's interesting in the recap before the show, we saw things from season 1 where Louis was talking about how Lestat hunted him. Now Lestat's saying that Louis indeed did the hunting. And I don't know if I believe that. Again, it could be completely biased. But he made references to Louis calling out to him while he was in the church. And at that point, Louis wasn't a vampire, so he might have been thinking all sorts of things about Lestat, but because Lestat is a vampire, he could hear it, so that's how he felt as though Louis was calling out to him, which is not really fair, because if people could hear all of our thoughts, we'd be calling out to every, attractive person we saw on the sidewalk, right? Which, we're not actually really doing that, because no one can read, just random people's minds on the street. But anyway, he tells a whole bunch of different stories, 2 very pivotal ones where he talks about things that happened in their household. So the first one he talked about was the creation of Claudia. That same night that Claudia was created, earlier on, Louis told Lestat that he was going to be left alone forever. So basically, Louis was semi-breaking up with him. But then he comes with this girl, and he asks Lestat to change her to a vampire. And Lestat's, of course, he says, oh, is she going to be a lapdog? What would she be? Oh, she would be a daughter. So this just shows, from both of their perspectives, we knew this since last year, that Lestat was looking for companionship, a way to solidify the bond he had with Louis, to create this family unit, to keep them all together, to keep him from being lonely. And Louis wanted to do this for absolution. He wanted to feel better about the riots that he was the catalyst for. And Lestat mentions, people who rioted, people who created the fire that, potentially would have burned Claudia, they did that on their free will. Maybe he did incite things, but he didn't actively kill Claudia. And we see at this point that Lestat does tell Louis that creating a vampire out of a child is against one of the great laws. And the way he said it to me, the way I inferred it, is that they had this conversation already. And from my calculations, Lestat and Louis were together for 7 years at this point. So I'm very sure that Lestat mentioned the rules and, not changing children. But Louis said, I don't care. And I was just thinking of this when I was making dinner tonight. You know what? It's so funny. At Claudia's creation, Louis said, I don't care about the ramifications. And just last week, when he was losing Claudia, he said, and I didn't care. Which I think is very telling, and especially is borne out, I think even more explicitly in this week's episode, is that Louis, again, I love Louis. Louis is my boy. I love him forever. But he is a bit self-centered. With Lestat telling Louis that if we create a vampire out of this child, she'll be stuck at this age for the rest of her life as a teenager, a hormonal teenager who hasn't fully grown yet. Her brain hasn't formed yet. She's not an adult. So she will be in that perpetual state of adolescence with hormones going up and down and all the mood swings and all that. And yeah, you know what, without them, she would have died if Louis hadn't shown up. But she mentioned last season, that he could have taken her to a hospital. And if she died, I don't mean to sound callous, but if she wasn't able to sustain those injuries, then unfortunately that happens sometimes. But to make the choice to create this immortal being, one that is not well suited for it, because you feel bad and you don't care what her quality of life is going to be for the rest of her long, long life, that's very selfish. And again, Louis does have that quality to him. And I 100% believe, and well, he corroborated anyway, that yes, Lestat did indeed tell him this, and he did it anyway because he didn't care, because he wanted to do what he wanted to do for himself. Now with Lestat talking about that massive fight that they had, you know what's interesting? When I did watch season 1, episode 5 originally, I did think it was interesting how there were a lot of pauses in the fight. So there was a lot of pausing in the rumbling and pausing in the yelling and the talking that we could hear. And I thought, like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know. I don't really fight people, so I don't really know how things go. But now seeing this retelling and seeing how confident Lestat is in their retelling of it, I'm more prone to believe what he said. So basically, yes, Lestat kind of capped things off or started things off when he put his hands around Claudia. And that's what started Louis, punching him and throwing him around. But later on, we see, well, we heard since then that Lestat said, I'm trying to restrain myself. And he tells him, like, Louis, I don't want to do this. Like, let's stop. And then we see in this episode that Louis was really antagonizing. Oh, don't stop what you can't finish. And then later on, we see, you know what? I'm going to take this hand. I'm going to get it around your neck the same way you did to our daughter. And I'm going to cut your head off and hang it up at the park and all this kind of things. And seeing as when we first met Louis, or one of the first times he met Louis, he put a knife to his brother's neck. His brother, who we know he loved very dearly, who had, he was maybe neuroatypical, right? So that was kind of a vicious side of Louis that we saw since like the very beginning. And then seeing him taunt him about, decapitating him and all those different things. And even when he was yelling out to Claudia saying like, oh, it's going to be okay, Claudia, he put on a plaintive voice, right? He put on a voice that made him sound like he was very much in distress. But then when he was going back to Lestat to tell him, yeah, I'm going to hang your head up at the park, he was speaking with, oh, my Bluetooth just came off. Anyway, when he was speaking to Lestat about hanging up his head at the park, he was saying it with all the gusto. And then that maniacal laugh he gave him, that was next level. And we never really seen Louis quite like that. So that's why I'm kind of like, was he exactly like that? Is Lestat exaggerating in that piece? Who knows? And at this rate, you probably won't know exactly what happened at the house that day, but it's something to keep in mind. So yeah, it was very eye-opening to see Lestat's recollection of the different things and his apology saying that, yes, I did that. I should, or talking about dropping him from the sky 2 kilometers. He said, of course, he knew that he's a vampire, like he's going to physically recuperate, but mentally, emotionally, what that did to him is that Lestat broke Louis in that. And that's why it took so long for him to let him back into the house, and that he'll always be sorry for it. And yeah, Lestat came off very sincere to me, even though I know Claudia begged to differ or thought it was too little too late if it was indeed sincere. But what I think it is, which I think could be a lesson to Louis, is I think that time off, those years that he spent underground since they left, since Claudia and Louis left, I think Lestat has had a time to do some self-reflection and see himself and how he was to his family through clearer eyes, which, as much as I love Louis, I don't think he always, especially back then, I don't think he has that degree of self-awareness. I don't think he's able to see outside himself, to see how he presents to other people at certain times. Because the way he treated Lestat, before the fall, before the big fight, it is completely understandable that Lestat went to Antoinette, especially because they had an open relationship too. So let's be real there as well. But Louis was basically shut down for 7 years. Remember the state of their house? They had a raccoon in their house. That house was so bad. And then even certain things, even with Claudia as well. And Lestat mentioned that, that Louis coddled Claudia And Lestat brought out the vampire essence that was in her. And he did mention he sees the best of his vampirism in Claudia. And as I mentioned before, Lestat and Claudia are a lot alike. And I think that's one of the big reasons, not everything, but one of the big reasons why they kind of clash a lot. But they do possess a lot of the same characteristics. And kind of going back to that part of it, where he's telling the story of Claudia's creation, how he told Louis about, not wanting to turn a 14-year-old. And Claudia's like, is that true? Is that true? And Louis, I understand, he's completely overwhelmed in this situation. He might be a bit dumbfounded. His memory, it was 20 years prior, so his memory was, a little shot. So I can understand that. But I still don't think, again, I love Louis, but I don't think that in that moment, even if the memories were jogging back to him, that he would be able to face Claudia and say, actually, there's a very good chance that this is correct and that did happen. There's sirens going by. Okay, it's gone now. Yeah, so I don't think that he'd have that degree of wherewithal. But you saw the look that Claudia was giving him, like, seriously, are you serious? He wouldn't have been able to do that at that time. Let's talk about the testimony part of the trial where Claudia speaks. Now, she doesn't really speak too much because this trial is a complete sham and everything is stacked against the trio. But she does put a few of her 2 cents in when, right after Lestat apologizes to Louis for dropping him out of the sky. And then she says, are you for real going to accept this apology? If this is sincere, if he really means it, it's too little, too late. You're going to, fall back into his hands like this. Again, a story that she has been saying basically throughout her entire lifetime. And then at one point she does get up despite her broken ankle tendons. And she said, you know what? Nothing is about me. Everything is about you guys and your messed up love story. I was never important to either of you. And in particularly Louis, who was supposed to be, the person that she's really close to. It was never about her. It's always about the two of them, which is true. Now let's go into Madeleine and the verdict/sentencing part of the trial. Madeleine throughout this entire thing looked completely catatonic. And I didn't actually catch this until my second watch that Santiago either put her in a trance or put a spell on her somehow because she was not mentally present during the entire thing. So her eyes were open the entire time. She was just kind of staring off to the side. And at one point she was muttering to herself in French. And then Santiago went back up to her and then she was catatonic again. And then she woke up towards the end. And so at this point, the coven gave her a choice to either be with the coven or face a death sentence. And as messed up as this was really beautiful and touching. And this actually brought a tear to my eye too, because Madeleine said, Claudia is my immortal companion. My coven is Claudia. And this was the first time in Claudia's entire life as a vampire where somebody made her the priority. And to think she only had, 10 minutes left. But in that time, she had somebody on that stage who put her front and center. But so nice. It's making me kind of teary-eyed now, too. Because Lestat and Louis, oh gosh, they weren't good enough for her. But she finally got that acceptance that she wanted. If only for 10 minutes. And of course, this was a death sentence for her. And then we get to Claudia, and she is found guilty. She did admit to poisoning Lestat, and technically she did break many of the different rules. Sentencing was coming, but before that, she wanted to have a last word. Santiago, being the meanie he is, said no, but Lestat said, let her speak. And this is not, I'm glad he did that, was able to do that. But this is not excusing the way he treated her throughout all those years. And then she made the comment about the guy taking off the hat and that she's going to remember all their faces. And if there's an afterlife, if there's not an afterlife, she's going to find a way to come and get them. And what I liked and what kind of, stayed consistent with Claudia's spark is she went out as a fighter because she was a person who endured this entire series, all sorts of different hardships. And she wasn't begging them, she wasn't groveling with them, because really she's overpowered anyway. She doesn't have that choice. And it was really sad, but it was good that she was able to go out, at least with her integrity and her pride intact. Now, talking about Louis is found guilty as well. But he is not sentenced to death. He is sentenced to banishment. Why is he sentenced to this option that wasn't really an option? It's because his boyfriend Armand came through. I'm going to talk about him later because I have a lot of things to say about him. But for now, he's taken off the stage. Well, let me just say, he was taken off the stage. He was taken down to the basement. He's been put in a crypt. He's been put in a coffin with lots of rocks on top of him. And like Lestat mentioned in season 1, these European vampires are vicious. They're vicious throughout the entire time. They're laughing with glee when they're, zapping them on the stage, when they're dragging them down the stairs, when they put Claudia in the box with the rats. These people are depraved. They are depraved, terrible European vampires. Let's go back upstairs. And Santiago is doing his thing. And he goes up and he opens up a window or a blind that reveals a window / reveals the sun. And he suns Claudia and Madeleine to death. When I thought about how Claudia would die, I thought it might be similar to the play. Maybe they threw out the window. I had a suspicion that the sunlight would be involved sometime because this was the first and only matinee show. So I thought, okay, the sun's going to come into play somehow. And it's interesting, like the words to the song were, I don't like windows when they close. We actually do like windows when they're closed because this window or the blind was open and this is what caused them to die. And Madeleine died first, maybe because she's a brand new vampire. She's not strong enough. And then Claudia died afterwards. She was there for a while. And she was singing the song of the play while she was doing it. Armand, in his defense, which you will never hear me say ever again, did look pretty distraught. And Lestat looked like he couldn't believe what was happening. And she looked at Lestat, as Armand said, Lestat was the last thing Claudia saw. The father, the maker who didn't love her didn't really love her, period. Not really. Which is so sad. She went out by herself because Louis wasn't on the stage. Yeah, that was tough. That was tough. And you know what I thought too? I was thinking back to season 1, episode 6, when Claudia took off on the train and then Lestat came in, killed the conductor and everything, and brought her back home. And again, Lestat is very cutting. Even though I say I love Lestat, he can be pretty evil. And when he was saying to her, you know what, I'm not going to treat you the same way that Bruce treated you, but if you try to leave again, or if you do anything bad again, I'm going to turn your bones to dust. And her bones are dust now. And I thought it was so rude. I think it was Santiago's silhouette we saw at the end where he picks up the dress and he just kind of like tosses it and like some of the ashes, dissipate throughout the air. It's just like, this poor girl didn't have a fighting chance her entire existence. It was just, that was really it. And I don't know why it took me like 4 watches to feel really upset, but yeah, it made me feel this was a very disturbing episode. One I knew was coming, but it was very, very sad, very tragic. Now let's talk about Armand. Armand, who had a bird's eye view of the entire thing as he was sitting in a seat guarded by the playwright of the play, who had a scythe in his hand, who Armand said if, he was threatened death. If he were to move, if he were to get up or whatever, the coven would have come after him and killed him. And he said he couldn't do anything to prevent the goings-on of the night. Now, we have seen Armand stop time. We have seen him pause people. We have seen him knock people's heads on a table to get them to, not notice what's going on around them. We have seen him throw Lestat against a brick wall with just by going like this, basically. We've seen him light a fire in his hand. We've seen him do a lot of different things. There is no way you can tell me that Armand wasn't able to stop things from happening. He was able to change the minds of the entire crowd to suggest banishment instead of death for Louis. So you recall, first it was Madeleine's sentence, Claudia's, and then Louis. So Louis was at the end. He did nothing for Claudia, but he was able to muster everything to change the sentence for Louis. And I believe it took a lot of effort from him because he had his whole eye shaky thing, which he only had in the episode with Daniel when he was a kid. Oh yeah, we saw him raise Daniel up and down in a chair. We saw him make Daniel sit in the air. So yeah, he's able to do a lot of things. He didn't do anything for Claudia because he didn't want to do anything for Claudia because he is evil. Also, Lestat mentioned that Armand helped drive Nikki, Lestat's lover from way back when. He helped drive him into insanity, which led him to suicide. So again, Armand does not have any clean hands in this. He wants Louis for himself. Everything else be damned, he doesn't care. And whether that's Louis' happiness, Claudia's life, / Louis' happiness, he doesn't care because he's selfish. And yeah, he watched the entire thing. And in present day, when Daniel's talking to him about it and Daniel's questioning him about it, he said, and I couldn't prevent it, talking about Claudia's death. Then he looks over at Louis and Louis looking at him sad. And then he says again, I couldn't prevent it. And this reminded me, again, I love the show. I remember everything. This reminded me, season 1, episode 3, when Louis and Lestat are talking about having an open relationship. And Louis said to Lestat, I can go and sleep with whoever I want. And Lestat said, of course, as long as you come home to me, of course. It's if you say it enough times, maybe you can try to convince yourself of it. And I feel that is what Armand was doing here, saying, I could not prevent it. I could not prevent it. He, for damn sure, could prevent it. There's a lot of other extraneous things to mention as well. In present day, in the interview where Louis talking about, Claudia's death and Claudia in the house and things like that, he's seeing Lestat in present day in hallucination form. Louis is not over Lestat. Louis is still thinking about him, and Lestat looks so gentle and loving and sympathetic in that view. This is what Louis wants. This is what Louis wants. This is not a recalling of how he was or anything like that. No, this is what Louis wants. I feel as though these goings-on here in the 40s was a prelude of what we would see Armand put Louis through in 1973. Again, Armand didn't do anything to help Claudia's case, but 2 seconds later, he did all he could to help Louis. I personally feel as though this is kind of letting Louis suffer the consequences and letting Louis' loved ones or people he has an affinity for suffer to show Louis that Armand is in control and he will do what he needs to do to get him. Everyone else be damned. Now, I haven't really fully formed this opinion, but I do think this is kind of maybe one of the first major dom sub flipping of the dynamic situations in between with the two of them. I with all my being, I know that Armand could have done something, could have attempted to do something to help Claudia out, but he didn't. And this actually works out well for him because without Louis having the burden of Claudia, that makes things better for Armand. I have a question about this entire thing. Isn't this trial, by its very nature, a violation of the great law that says that immortals can't let mortals know about their true being, about their vampirism, unless they kill them right after? So they can't walk away knowing, oh, they're vampires over there. But that's exactly what they did. These people left the theater and no one was eaten. So isn't this a huge contradiction? People know that they're vampires for real because Lestat did all those movements going back and forth in between the balcony and the stage. So I don't know. I feel some hypocrisy right there. Maybe that law isn't the biggest. I would think it would be pretty big, but what do I know? Did you guys see Lestat had rings on his finger, in particular one on his wedding ring finger? He had another one, I think, on his index finger or his thumb. I can't remember, but he definitely had a ring on his wedding finger. So what's that about? I'm curious to know if they addressed that at all. I thoroughly enjoyed this episode, as sad as it was. It was very well executed. The acting, again, is top-notch. I love all the actors on this show, but Sam Reed, I think this is one of his standouts. He's always great, but he plays so many different emotions, and I would love to play a character like Lestat, so multifaceted. He's flamboyant, he's a little over the top, he's sentimental, he's emotional, he's serious, he's stern, he's menacing. He's everything all at once, and it was really, really exciting to see. And of course, Jacob Anderson and Delaney Hayes, I always forget her last name, but they're also exceptional too. They always are. And I do love Ben Daniels, I think is his name, who plays Santiago, even though Santiago. I will be back here next week. So anyway, I would love to know your thoughts on this episode. Do you believe Lestat? Do you believe Lestat's version of events are closer to the actual truth? I do. What do you think about Armand? Am I being too tough on him? I don't think I am, but if you think that maybe he was incapacitated, that he couldn't actually help Claudia out, I will love to know why you think that. I should mention I am not a book reader. I watched the movie 1,000 years ago. I don't remember it, so if you happen to know any of the spoilers, please don't say anything because this girl doesn't know Jack, and I like to keep it that way. All right, I will see you next week, and you guys keep your heart safe, all right? I'll see you later. Have a good one. Bye.